Hey, my beautiful love. So we have the full moon coming up, and I just thought I would feel into the energy before that arrives and just sort of speak about what is happening. So the full moon is on the 9th of October, so on Sunday. But at the same time, we have Pluto that's been retrograde for a while, stationing direct. And we also have Mercury. So Pluto's doing that on the 8th, 9th of October. And Mercury is then on the 10th moving into Libra, so shifting signs. And also still a bit in its shadow period after the retrograde. So it's still going over the same points. And so I sort of felt like it might feel like there's just a lot already in the collective sky happening. Whenever we have a big planet, so an external planet like Pluto that governs more the collective, obviously it impacts us on a different level, but it is more of a collective planet. There's those sort of planets spend a lot of time in retrograde and forward in that. But when they station, either to go retrograde or direct, is when we almost feel that impact on a really personal, physical level. Well, that's what I've sort of felt. I always feel Pluto's movements. And so I just wanted to bring that in because that added another layer into the space we're in. And then we have the full moon on Sunday, like I mentioned, in Aries. And this full moon is conjunct Chiron, and they're both opposite the Sun and Venus. And the Sun and Venus are conjunct, as well as all of them aspecting Saturn, either through a sextile or as a trine. So you can see the players we have are naturally the Sun and the Moon. We've got Chiron, we've got Venus, and we've got Saturn. And we also have the fact that we're in eclipse season, building up to the solar eclipse at the end of the month. And so for me, when I was like thinking about it and feeling into the space, is it almost feels like there's something in the air, whether you feel it tangibly in the air or in your subconscious, but there's a stirring. That's the only sort of feeling I could feel, is like there's something there, but you just can't put your finger on what it is. Like there's just this rumbling, I guess, is how I could say. And that for me is what's feeling into this thing, is that a lot of stuff is coming up for us to like look at. I mean, the Pluto thing will bring up whatever sort of has been processing in the retrograde is going to come up for us to see. Now moving into the direct phase, so a lot of old ways of doing are like crumbling. I feel like it's sort of that crumble of what was a structure and safety is crumbling, not necessarily negatively. There's never good or positive, but it's not serving where we need to go as a collective. And then the feeling of those wounds will then be heightened because Chiron is the wounded healer. And so we have Chiron being aspected by the moon conjunct, which means it's almost this illumination on wounds that potentially we had thought were gone or we didn't want to look at or didn't want to face head on. This is going to be coming up. And it's normally in Aries, it's about our individuality. Where are we true into ourselves, our authenticness, our drive of creation, those sort of themes playing up with this. And it's being balanced with the Venus and Sun in Libra, which is about balance, which is in relationships. So there's this the two scales of like needing your individuality. How do you how do you focus on being an individual? How do you stay in your authenticity? How do you live life as this being? But balancing in the fact that we're actually in a humanity and we need to be in relationships that support us. We co-create together. Even if it's not in a physical relationship, we co-create with the universe. So there's the drive of achieving from self, but also then balancing with the need that we are part of this great collective. And this is what the Saturn influence brings as well, is what are we doing as this collective, as the Pluto's just crumbling all these structures that didn't serve us anymore in a collective? What are we rebuilding? What are we recreating? What are we elevating into the consciousness? And so that's very much collectively, but it plays in yours in terms of what do you need to let go of, my loves? What theme is currently playing on? Because often we're like, oh, well, I've healed that. I've worked on it. I don't understand why it's up. But there's always deeper layers, and there's potentially a part of self that has attached to the story, attached to the wound. It's become a part of your identity, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. Somewhere part of that is how you identify, what you identify with. And so it's really taking this moment to be truly honest and being like, well, if I don't want to recreate this pattern and I truly want to heal this wound, then what part of that identity do I need to let go of? What part of that no longer serves where I want to go and who I want to be? How do I embody that? And it's not this like very black and white. I mean, often when we speak about it, it's like, well, just get rid of it. It's this process, my love. It's this process of being into that. And, I can almost feel like when we're in the retrograde season, I spoke of being with like under the ground and doing our little roots and everything like that. When you push through, like even though you're like, oh, sunlight, amazing world, like a plant is still a tiny sapling. It's like, it's not suddenly it just comes out and it's this massive oak tree, if we go with an oak tree. It's a tiny sapling still. The roots are there. It knows that it's got that, but it's still very vulnerable. It's still very new. It's still, suddenly it's like, oh, there are all these different elements to contend with and create into. And that's the same as when you start releasing old wounds and old identities and stuff, my love, is you don't suddenly go into the giant oak. It's nurturing that there's a part of you that felt safe in the wound, strange as it is, but it's a known, it. So verging out of that and healing it and becoming this identity you really want to be is a process, love. And this is where we're coming into this phase. I think the eclipse is coming into restructure, being like, where are we really letting go of, the South Node and the Scorpio, the old things, the dense, heavy stuff, and coming into the Taurus of like, the material in terms of Gaia, Earth, and that consciousness that we're coming into. And so this eclipse, I feel, is sort of bringing us back into being in presence in the body, being on this physical plane. How are we looking after nature? How are we doing all of that? But we will get into like the energy of that closer to October. But this is what it is. So it's creating this like push into that space. And at the same time, while we're emerging out of sort of retrograde, Pluto, Saturn will go later this month. Mars is going to go retrograde. So it's in its shadow period. And so for me, it's like we're really being called into rebuilding, but from the feminine part, the yin energy. And that doesn't mean like we discount all the beautiful qualities of the masculine and that drive and everything like that. Not at all. What the feminine is that we're really going into that sacral, and we're clearing out the shame we potentially have, the unworthiness, the guilt, any of those sort of heavy vibrations, clearing those out of the sacral and the root. And so that the feminine creativity, feminine gives birth in order for the masculine to drive forward, that is the gift of it. The female body houses this baby and then gives birth, and then we drive and we raise it. Drive's probably the wrong word, but we raise it. So this is what I think this period is doing, is you're having all of these old wounds that potentially come up, potentially within self, how you relate to the world, your relationships, and you're letting that go. But in this identity that you're becoming and creating this new version, it comes from a place of the yin. It comes from that very much the feminine, gentle, compassionate space, like I said, if you picture the sapling of nurturing this, so that when Mars goes direct in January, and we still have that energy till about March, which I'm pretty sure if we work it out is when the next eclipse season is. So it's a beautiful period of we're really tending to this over this next eclipse period, the 6-month window. And this is sort of what's starting to come up for you. And that's really what I feel into this energy, is that it's not to have it all figured out yet. And it is to really be able to take the time to look into self, look into your relationships, and see what you can do differently, and how do you become and embody that self. You know, some really great tools to use for these sort of things is, for me, I find journaling so powerful, you know, just writing what's there and not the need to analyze what's written, but just to give a voice to something, to allow that channel of stuff to leave. Movement is so important, my loves, whether it's a yoga practice, going to gym, walking in nature, grounding is so important. You need to become really connected into this beautiful body in order to hold the expansion. So you ground in order to expand out in all aspects, is my firm belief. And so, yeah, that's what I would say, is really just cultivate those sort of practices that allow things to emerge from the subconscious. Through those practices, it's a safe channel for them to move out, instead of like it just spewing out and being a volcano. I mean, sometimes volcanoes are necessary. But that's just what I was feeling into, my loves. And I sort of wanted to come here and do this before the full moon, because it just feels so tangible already. I can already feel the energy. I can feel it in my body. And perhaps if you can't, that's fine too. You know, all of us get impacted by them at different stages, depending where it hits in our chart. But it is just the awareness that if we are going through this as a collective, so holding more compassion for self and also for others through this process. Sending you so much love and so much beautiful yin feminine energy as you start birthing and creating into the new, not needing it to manifest instantaneously, but allowing it to just be nurtured and cared for and loved. Yeah. Sending you so much love. Bye, my beautiful souls.